New.
So like millennials, and so that's kind of the demographic background. I think some of them were in Pakistan, some of them were diaspora. It sounded like most of them were diaspora just based on their accents. I don't know how many of them were actually born or raised
and their
outside.
Politics.
Well, see, you would be able to speak better to that than, my interaction is, of course, mostly, with people here. But one guy was like, this Israel-Palestine thing is important, but I feel like we, in Pakistan, we always, get a tunnel vision, and it's either Israel-Palestine or it's Kashmir, and we don't care about any of the other causes. And what about what's going on with the Uyghurs in China, which is a whole other thing that we can get into maybe for another episode.
Definitely.
But what's going on with the Uyghurs in China? Why aren't we talking about that? And then he's like, in Bahariya Town there are houses on fire. And for those who don't know, Bahariya Town is a neighborhood in Karachi.
It's
in Pakistan.
It's a good
subdivision.
No, so they made a commercial installment like a little far off from Karachi, right? North of Karachi.
Yeah.
And basically, they're taking over indigenous people's lands to build this commercial property for this big time.
I would see ads for that on Geo and on these channels.
But the guy has gypped a lot of people.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So he's ripping off not only the people whose property he's taking, but the people who are buying his houses.
Yeah.
Like he's making duplexes there. Right, or like something like that. He has multiple projects, and he's under lawsuits for multiple ones.
Interesting.
But he's one of the richest people, if not the richest person in Pakistan. One of the
somebody like that could get away with it.
Malik Riaz.
Oh yeah, I've heard I remember it was like Malik Riaz ko call karo, as if he was the one who was going to answer the phone.
There's some like family members of ours. That the same shit happened when they paid money for like a flat and.
That happened. So it happened to my parents, bro. It pissed me the hell off. So they paid money for like years in installments or something into some to some scheme. And after a few years, not only did they not get any paperwork involved with that scheme, the guy was like, yeah, you can either pay us like $3,000 and get a property half the size that you were promised originally, or you can pay 20 and get the full size. And we're like, well, why are we paying additional money into like something like But there's no one you can really go to, man. This guy's just too, like...
exactly.
There's no one who, like,
Like, you can't go to anybody. That's the issue.
Yeah, this guy's...
there's no accountability.
He's also big in, he's into, like, the whole People's Party, like, elite. He's with that
so
crowd.
He's covered.
Yeah, he's with that
He's
crowd.
covered. Whatever he does, he's straight.
But he's big time. He too much, like, a lot of money.
Yeah.
Too much money.
Malik Riaz Saab.
But this guy was like, oh, but what about Bahariya Town? And it's like, he also prefaced this whole thing by saying, I do not want to engage in what about it.
Yeah, he did say that at the beginning.
And then at some point, I'm pretty sure he did use the, what about, and it was like, well, you mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It was very annoying.
So that happened again today. Somebody else was doing the same what about thing. And they brought up, we're only focusing on Palestine and on Kashmir. It's the same thing.
But then you're focusing on two things. What else do you? I don't know. What else are you trying to focus on?
Well, so that's the thing is like how micro and how granular do you want to go? How far from home do you want to go? How far? And then the other thing is looking at all of these oppressions just as human rights violations, rather than seeing the geopolitical structures and how what's happening in Palestine. Look, I don't want to give another example and say it's more important than this or this or whatever the case may be, right? But what's not only how egregious those violations are, it's what project that's a part of.
Of course.
And what that arm is doing. And that arm is working in conjunction with other arms. And that's what people don't realize. They look at what's being worked with. Mm-hmm. And you see the shocking images, That's what got a lot of people aware of this in the first place, right? So, okay, cool. The social media, the shocking images come up and you're like, oh, damn, okay, this is what's happening there. But then that's the conflict for you. It's a conflict which causes, these pictures that you're seeing online of what's happening in Gaza. Rather than them knowing like, okay, well, what's actually going on? What's the power play?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? Who has a stake in it? Who are the stakeholders?
Instead, just label it something, and since if you're, if it's something
we're
good,
taking care of this oppression, why don't we focus on other oppressions too? It's not just about the
There's a
oppression.
guy who got robbed here down the street.
There's
last
exactly.
night.
You
like,
can keep going.
As in, if you are willing to, like, unless you are willing to say, okay, both of those things are also something you need to equally be focused on. That guy getting robbed down the street or in downtown right now, which is probably happening, or like this conflict, this like the Syrian conflict, or the Uyghur conflict, right? We have to be like, oh, both of these situations are either exactly alike, or we have to understand there's degrees to this.
Yeah.
Right? It can't be both.
Right.
And we really should. The first way to do that is to kind of stay away from like just not using the wrong terms to describe things. Right? Yeah. It's not genocide if someone gets robbed down the street.
Right.
Right? Obviously.
Right.
And what's happening in Palestine right now, you can say it's ethnic cleansing. Or, I mean, like...
It's apartheid. It's ethnic cleansing.
And it's not genocide, because that would be... The whole term would be, like, describing a different phenomena that's taking place altogether.
So, delineate that.
Well, I feel like genocide is, the targeted, like, extermination or displacement of a people. Where I feel like at this point, a lot of what the indication is, especially with this general strike call and all that.
Look up the definition of genocide, actually.
Genocide and ethnic cleansing.
And ethnic cleansing.
And also, like, I guess...
Apartheid, for those who are like, no, it's you don't use, like... Don't over-exaggerate the whatever,
Yeah. I feel like ethnic cleansing is definitely taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are places that are being cleansed of an ethnicity.
Yeah. But...
That's what started
I
this.
feel like the state now, as opposed to 20, 30 years ago, where the genocidal tendencies were definitely a part of the overall mentality, like the outlook that the Israeli state had towards the Palestinians, up till probably the prime minister or presidency presidency or prime ministership of Rabin. Can you check out
Rabin?
Yeah. Who really changed that discourse.
Yeah.
But after that, it was more of like, okay, we've already conquered a people. We've already subjugated them. We've seeped them of any political agency. And the only organization they have, or quote unquote, the state or the authority, is more of a police for us on these people. Rather, now at that point, right? In the
their state.
The Palestinian, the PLO, what it devolved
Israel
into.
Saying the PLO works as basically an arm
from genocide, now the tendency, the outlook is not genocidal. We're not trying to displace and murder these people anymore. We are trying to seep them of their land and their labor.
Yeah.
So they're going to work for us as third-class citizens, not even second class.
Right. And
we will take their land whenever we want and displace them. And they will, when we it's not they will also work in our factories and get some kind of pay out of it,
right,
and be able to go walk home and go through this checkpoint and get searched.
Yeah.
They'll be able to go through all the humiliation of a normal, life under occupation,
right,
while they work for us.
Yeah.
It's no longer just like, hey, we need to exterminate these people and take their land en masse, like it was maybe at the inception of the state, maybe. Or even like the general, we see it right now. These people are ready to write their names on the rockets or view, from the hill.
Mm-hmm.
They have that tendency almost, or remnants of it.
Yeah.
And the dehumanization has taken place, obviously, whenever both things are taking place. But here,
there may be a genocidal mindset among some of the settlers.
Yeah, and that is.
But you're saying the state policy would be to utilize
the status quo, the elite, the political, the academics. They understand that the dynamic, and even the people who are like me and you, us, all three of us, people who are like right now in anger, right? In our lifetimes, I remember I've seen Yasser Arafat on TV, before he died, obviously, as a kid, right? Like, we've seen that the discourse has changed, the power dynamic has shifted so much further, where before there'll be, even against, I'm not a proponent of the two-state solution,
right?
But at least that was something we have to respect. There's two different interests at play here. There's two states, there's two political and power, there's two different entities, forces at play here. As opposed to now, we're like, hey man, you should not be doing this to this guy. It's just more of
it's the one person.
We even in our mindsets, we've agreed these are already conquered lands.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
you've already taken over everything,
Right.
and now you should kind of like not be at least bombing it.
Right.
That's why whenever
Right.
there's a ceasefire, half of the people who are like kind of like, I mean, not to their fault, not to fault anyone, but as soon as there's a ceasefire, you see a significant drop in the not the support, but the overall visibility of this topic. And how much care people actually have for this, because there's other stuff to worry about, obviously,
right,
but also
sure.
because the goalposts have shifted so much on this topic from before, where this was like, you know, like, oh, our demands are a 2-state solution, and the more like the other thing would be like, oh, it's a 1-state solution instead. Now it's more like, well, we agree, no, the 2-state solution is never going to happen. Like
and
that, that's
it's going to be
impossible.
one unfavorable state.
It has to be one state, so it has to be an apartheid state.
But it's going to end up being an apartheid. Yeah.
Like the way this, like the set, like how they've settled the lands over the past 2 decades, especially.
Yeah.
And how they've carved out like the West Bank completely out of like, you know, like into like literally like small domains or pockets, you know, ghettos. Honestly,
looks like cheese on a map. Like with all the holes.
Like you can describe it like as if a ghetto.
Yeah.
A ghetto is on a map, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. These are rundown parts of town that have like anyone can come and whoop your ass and take your house.
Exactly.
Right, and you have no guns to protect you, but the other people are armed. You can, you know, like I'm not sure what the citizenship laws look like or whatnot of this, like, you know, like
they're the citizens of the PA. They're not Israeli citizens.
But they can go work inside.
But they
Israel.
can work inside Israel.
Yeah. So again, you can like, you know, submit your labor and your land, but and at times your life, if you know, if someone feels like it, if a settler's having a bad day, he can fuck around with you.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like the discourse has become, I wouldn't say lukewarm, but I guess it's a byproduct of the situation, right? That's like our situation has devolved, and so has our demand.
Yeah. So kind of there's a hopelessness there. Do you think?
I feel like the movement is alive and well, and I think the nation state is not, you know, it's not the important thing here, right? We're trying to, the people can stay alive, like the people and the identity stays alive without, but like we discussed maybe before, thinking that there will ever be like an armed rebellion happening, that seems less and less likely, right?
From Gaza, they're getting rockets fired at them north to south. The only thing they can do is mow the lawn, as literally some of these people have said. Some of these Israelis, some politician or something was like, "You need to mow the lawn in Gaza," right? But they couldn't get away with doing that either. There was a military victory on the side of the Palestinians this time around, I would say, right? Not looking at the death tolls,
of course,
not looking at the material damage.
But they were able to like not be imposed upon.
Yeah, it was a strategic victory. Because I'm thinking what Israel would have assumed is they could do whatever they want in Sheikh Jarrah.
Yeah.
Right? And they can do whatever they want at Masjid al-Aqsa.
Yeah.
Right? And Gaza is Gaza over there.
Yeah.
Right? That's typically, they've taken advantage of the whole divide and conquer thing. The division there, right? Between the West Bank and Gaza. I don't think they expected resistance from Gaza to start firing on Israel because of what Israel is doing in Jerusalem and the West Bank. They didn't see that coming. And with that kind of barrage of rockets, Iron Dome, even they claimed Iron Dome worked 90% of the time. Had a 90% success rate. So it's way lower than that.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
So a lot of unexpected things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they miss also this whole situation, like the Fatah guy, Mahmoud Abbas.
Yeah,
totally like out of the picture.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But
the approval ratings of the Gaza political party Hamas went up, soared up, because they were the people who stood up. So when you say Hamas is a terrorist group, this, that, I mean, not you, but
and the general discourse of this, like the politics in this country.
Well, that's not realizing that it's also that it's not a terrorist group, right? It's if they're talking about the military wing, it's under a different name. Hamas is an organization that's a political party.
What's their name? What's the military wing's name?
Al-Qassam. Qassam brigades, something like that.
Don't search that. FBI is gonna start tracking us.
That's why I was like, let me just not.
I feel like in the outlook,
to be honest,
for me,
yeah,
for the next 20, 30 years, you can see regimes that have kind of propped up whatever little resistance they have with the meager, rockets they have. Or what, honestly, in my opinion, seem more like these guys are making them inside their houses at times. I'm guessing.
I mean, this time around, they were pretty effective.
Well, I mean, right. Then I would ask, why are they not able to, you go to Pakistan, right? You can go to a garage this big, maybe smaller, and there'll be a guy making bullets, right? And I'm not saying anyone should buy arms or send arms. I'm saying it makes no sense to me that this country, who is armed with these rockets that they're smuggling in through underground tunnels from Lebanon or Syria that are funded by Iran, why are they not able to get anything but these stupid ass rockets, bro? Why?
What do you mean? What do you want them to get?
As in, are they not able to ever get a machine gun or
they have them.
Or
you've seen the military parades that have been going on these past couple days.
Or
they're strapped.
Something a little bit more than you would buy at Walmart.
Like a tank.
Last year. Not a tank. Obviously, there will be no underground tunnel for a tank. Well, I don't know. Even anti-air missiles,
surface-to-air missiles.
Yeah, they have a bunch of these helicopters coming, tear gases. There's not boots on the ground that you're gonna use
right.
And these homemade rockets, or whatever they're not homemade, whatever, made in whatever country sponsoring
Syria,
them.
Iran, whatever.
They're let's say they're effective this time around, but generally over the span of this rocket thing, this comes up every time there's Israel's trying to do some fuck shit there. I don't know. I mean, you would feel maybe if they were actually getting weapons smuggled in, they would be hey, we're getting hit by these helicopters and these airplanes. Maybe we should add in because I'm sure they have those in Lebanon, Syria. They have weapons of all kinds. Everywhere.
They have surface-to-air missiles in Syria and Lebanon for sure.
But I think these sponsors, Lebanon, Syria. In Iran, you'll see the political changes over the next 2 decades really hampering any resistance they have, and Hamas, because I don't consider what they have in Fatah resistance, right?
Fatah is not resistance.
Yeah,
or
forget resistance.
Fatah is like the PLO.
Yeah, I mean the PLO and more post 2000, post 1999.
No, I mean not the original,
not them OGs.
No,
but the same people, funny enough, but almost, but I mean I don't feel their state sponsors will be sustaining themselves, let alone Hamas, or you feel me?
Yeah,
I don't see the Iranian regime sustaining itself to a point where itself, let alone some ragtag group, or not ragtag group. I'm not sure what the
I wouldn't say they're ragtag. See, that's
they're an organization.
The thing that these people have that even we don't have is morale, right? And that counts for a lot.
Of course,
that counts for a lot, because with morale you can be more gutsy.
Of course,
and pull things off that the other side wouldn't be able to pull off, right? Because there's a certain morale that you have when you're defending your home versus the whatever is fueling people to take the home, right? And that forces people to be ingenuous in all kinds of ways, right?
I mean, the struggle lives on first and foremost in spirit.
It forces innovation.
The physical is one thing, but obviously there's a more spiritual aspect to this for sure, where the revolution kind of lives on spiritually. So even if there's a defeat on the ground, let's say, which I mean, if you look at it over the past 50, 60 years, and you look at the trajectory where this is going, I said it right this time.
Yeah, you
did. where it's going this time, you're even if there is total takeover of every every inch of this land over the past my lifetime, right? Even then, that does not mean anything for what the resistance is, because that that lives on in other ways.
So do you think that would ever bubble up in these groups that are armed resistance right now? Do you think that armed resistance is ever going to go away? Do you think it's going to turn into a guerrilla thing? Do you think it's going to become sleeper cells or whatever in this one state, apartheid state?
it's.
Or do you think Gaza is small enough that I think they would just keep that blockaded? Would they even bother taking it over?
There's
Probably
no
not.
reason to do anything with that. It's just a big ghetto.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't. You just keep it like that. You get some of the people who like they say 50%, a little bit more is unemployed.
Yeah.
The other 50% is probably like out of that. I'm guessing a large percentage is employed inside of Israel. You get like the labor that you want.
Yeah.
You pay them shit prices. Shit wages. It works out for all the moneyed classes.
I don't know if Gazans are allowed to go outside of Israel like that.
Yeah, it's
not
not
outside of Gaza like that, even for work.
Really, it's not
I don't
the
know.
same.
I don't know. Maybe.
Well, I'm guessing for school and stuff for sure. At least that was the case before. You would see like kids
for
from
school.
Gaza, kids from Gaza going into like Israeli church or like passing at least because so much of it is like, well, passing through like checkpoints is normal, but like having to go through a bunch of those just to get somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I'm guessing.
Sure. Probably.
Completely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously these things are so fluid. Like over the they change like
right.
Whatever you thought was like the reality of it 5 years ago, 5 years later, like it turns out that land is not even like it's not even like you're like, oh look, Israel is building this giant highway that like kind of like segregates this whole area and cuts through like this part of Palestine. It turns out like now you look back at it, no one even cares because they took over the other part of it too. So
right. Yeah.
No, it's like, hey, this is all Israeli land. What you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think like did we ever get what was that
the definition
of genocide, man? We
the definition of genocide.
Going back to that,
just whatever the top like
deliberate killing of what?
The deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. Ethnic cleansing is the mass expulsion or killing of members of an unwanted ethnic or religious group in a society.
Okay.
And then apartheid is a policy or system of segregation or discrimination on grounds of race. Segregation on grounds of other than race is gender apartheid.
So what would be the proper term? The proper term to according to this,
it's apartheid, and there's an
dictionary.
element of ethnic cleansing, right?
I think it's ethnic cleansing.
But I mean, what
ethnic cleansing in an apartheid state that's moving more and more towards apartheidism.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, are they like trying to like expel anyone or kill anyone at this? Oh, they are trying to expel people.
Well, they're trying to expel them from everywhere that they want them to be expelled.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And wherever they could be, like you said, used as a labor force.
So that would definitely be like something that describes it better, I think, at this point in the struggle than genocide. And in the past, I wouldn't describe it as genocide either, simply because there was more of a resistance. There was at least an armed resistance.
It was genocidal, right? The mentality of these people was genocidal, right? But the state, the leadership, I mean, if you ask some settler, or they have interviews with them where they're like, yeah, we should kill all the Arabs.
Yeah. That's like that's
we should kill them all, right? So there is that genocide, but at the top, right, that is being leveraged to do ethnic cleansing to create an apartheid state.
And okay, we can agree. This is a settler state. These are people who are like being like
colonized.
They're being imported population into this like part of the world, right? These people are imported from Europe into the So it's a colonial state because it was colonized originally by the British, right? And then it's a settler state, obviously. Now, if I was to say what's happening in Jiangxing province, is that's also settler colonial?
What that guy said.
Then you'd be like, well, that makes no sense because they're not colonizing that area. They're not settling it. It's already like they're not resettling that area.
Right. Yeah. Well, they will say that, right? There are Han populations that are moving there because there's some program that that the government did to try to do like an exchange. Somehow they were getting Uyghur laborers to work elsewhere in China, and they were having Han people settle in parts of Xinjiang. For what, I'm not sure if it was a work thing or what, but they will stay. But when you look at the overall population statistics, that doesn't hold up, right? Because the one-child policy, which is now a 3-child policy as of today or whatever, right? That never applied to the Uyghurs.
Yeah,
right?
It didn't apply to minorities.
Yeah.
It only applied
so they were allowed to have as many kids as they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it could be many things, and the Chinese state is oppressive in every way that state power is exercised, right? Yeah, they're oppressive in that way. But it's not because, like, you heard some of the things coming out, like, oh, they're making soldiers sleep with, like, the wives of, like, Uyghur Muslims, or, like, they're, like, live, like, like, taking out organs from people while they're alive or something, and it's, like,
like testing, like...
Yeah, there's...
one of the things that they said is forced sterilizations, and they're like, this is ethnic cleansing, because of forced sterilizations and because of the, like, influx of Han people. I mean, even though when you look at that, it's which population went up. Right?
Yeah.
And you still had the Uyghur population.
So they're saying that the Han are being imported into Uyghur land, or...
Yeah, there's some policy. This guy, Carl Shah, actually had a really good interview with this Uyghur activist on that, where he brings some of these points up. But yeah, then they're like, well, they're forcing IUDs into, Uyghur women in these camps. But it's like, okay, well, that doesn't line up with China's policy in general.
Yeah, and how are they doing? Are they, like, using like weapons? Or they, like,
that's supposedly, yeah.
So
supposedly.
Every other country right now where it's like something like this is happening, Kashmir, Palestine.
Yeah.
Palestine, freaking any police state. I don't know. Name something. You can see freaking
Burma,
like
parts of Burma.
You're seeing people leaving these lands. You're seeing people, like, in dire situations. You're seeing, like, like cities being lit up at nighttime with a bomb, right? And somehow the Chinese state has completely, like, shut any part of this down. Anything, any news, any video, anything being uploaded anywhere.
What did they shut down?
I'm saying any advanced state, right?
Yeah.
Right now, when they have done things that are comparable to what is being described as being done in Jiangxing province.
Repeat after me. Xinjiang.
Xinjiang.
Yes. Now say it fast. Xinjiang. Bam.
Really? That's like the third different
iteration you've heard.
Yeah. This one, I thought I was really proud of this one. I thought I was saying it right, but
no,
Xinjiang.
Yeah, Xinjiang.
So and it's Uyghur.
Yeah,
not Uyghur.
I don't know about that one.
Okay, well,
I've heard multiple of those as well.
Yeah, I've heard both. I'm not sure which one is, like,
Uyghur.
In the Uyghur language. I don't know. I just pronounce it Uyghur. Whatever it is.
With the Xinjiang province, whatever is supposedly happening there, I'm not sure exactly what it is, right? But whatever it is happening there is supposedly comparable to what is happening.
Is what they say. No, that's what they say. That's one of their things. Is there's a Holocaust going on.
Okay. Well, I mean, let's say it's a couple of degrees more, like, exponentially worse than what's happening in Palestine or Kashmir right now.
Sure.
Right? Oh, or Yemen or Syria.
It's just really weird to compare these kind of things.
Yeah,
in terms of the oppression, right?
And I wouldn't even indulge myself with this unless this was such a big thing at the Clubhouse thing that we're discussing in both days. But, like, you're like, hey, how is it that those states, being as oppressive towards those populations, they're not able to control the information flowing out of it, which is describing those situations, right? Like in Palestine, Muhammad al-Kurd, he's coming on CNN, right? Yeah. You're telling me either the Israeli state is just very lenient towards this whole situation, or Kashmir, whatever's happening there. There's a curfew. There's freaking reporters there who are like recording the curfew happening. Indian soldiers going in and out. Yeah. Somehow in China, they're just like this advanced, like, future sci-fi state that is able to harvest organs and, like, sleep with the mothers of these kids, and everything is happening without anyone knowing anywhere. There is nothing except for just people. I have not heard any Kashmiri guy who has run away from Kashmir being used as the only source of information to describe Kashmir, what's happening there. But when it comes to, or in Palestine, it's not Muhammad al-Kurd who's describing this, and then we're like, oh shit, this is happening.
So let me play devil's advocate though. Xinjiang is huge, huge compared to Palestine and Kashmir. Yeah. Do you think there's enough space for things to be covered up?
What do you mean?
As in, like, tourists who go to Xinjiang, the areas that they're going to go to, versus the areas where this might be happening. I'm just thinking
Well, I mean,
of
I'm
like
not-
what would the other side, you know?
Yeah, I don't know how many tourist people go there. But
Or journalists, as in anybody, the public,
Well,
outside public.
Oh, how many journalists go there?
Yeah, journalists or whoever it may be, who would be able to, Muhammad al-Kurds and whatnot, people who are able to document these things.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing most of the people who've been documenting these struggles from the inside, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're just like
Common Uyghurs.
they're not like tourists.
Yeah.
Then they're not like like people like reporters necessarily, right?
Yeah,
They're not the Chinese situation, but like
not the Chinese situation.
talking about like what's happening in like let's say Palestine or even like a lot of times in Syria.
Right.
Well, yeah, except for obviously Syria, the whole world media is kind of there now. But you're getting information through these, like you're seeing this is happening.
Yeah,
Right. And then you're getting like these people like Muhammad al-Kurd, for example, and examples like that.
yeah,
They're providing added context to what's going on,
right.
as opposed to like this Chinese situation where like not only the primary, the only way this is like being like transposed to us is, oh well, look at this guy who survived this, right?
Yeah. Mass testimony.
But go ahead. How would you like? I would love to know how you would defend that if someone was to ask you that. Right? You were playing
Ask
devil's
what?
advocate.
Ask what?
As in, like, why
What's
is
this?
there no visual testimony, like visual, like aid to this, like this
So
story?
that's the thing. They have those pictures, right? They have those pictures. You might have seen a whole ton of like prisoners that were on their knees. They had their heads tied up, and the caption of it was, "These are Uyghur people being tied up before they get put on buses to be sent out to these camps." But then there are people who were like, wait, no, this picture is from somewhere, I don't remember where it was, but they identified that picture as some like police training thing or something else. So what do you do when you have these kind of there was the differing media narratives, right? There was a picture that was pixelated because supposedly it was dead bodies who were bleeding, and those were Uyghurs. And then somebody depixelated the photos, and it turned out that those were actually spilled boxes of wine bottles.
No.
Right? So there's these kind
Wow.
of things. There are these kind of things where, like, now the other thing they'll say is the satellite imagery, right? You can see like movements of, people or the movements of like things in these construction of these different facilities. But then again, some of them, when you actually look at it, it's a high school. So yeah, there are Uyghurs being taken to this high school and that's the thing, for what? They'll say, why are they being taken then in the first place? Right? And that's where the conundrum was for me, because
but you can't make the jump straight to like, well, these Uyghurs are being taken to this high school to ethnic cleansing.
Well, so then it's the claims that, okay, this is what's going on there, and then it's like, okay, well, look what these people are saying. It's testimony. It's these guys. So then it's what, how do you what's the threshold past which, or is there a threshold past which mass testimony becomes like, okay, we're gonna buy this? Because even then, right, there are conflicting narratives, right? Some people are saying there are forced hysterectomies, organ harvesting. Some people are saying it's a vocational thing. It's like, they made us, and what it is to me, what it seems like it is to me, is China's attempt at creating uniformity. Because as an authoritarian state that has some kind of, I guess, the point would be to eliminate ideologies that could potentially be counter to allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party.
For sure.
Right? And so whether that's a religious ideology, whether that's an ethnic ideology, because there are Hui Muslims. Hui Muslims are not going through what the Uyghur Muslims are supposedly going through. But that's because ethnically they have the roots with Han, they speak Mandarin. So for Uyghurs, they have multiple factors delineating them. One is the language, the ethnicity, the culture. Then there's the religious difference as well. And that's a difference that the Chinese government doesn't want that. Because then it'll be easier for there to be counter ideologies to their ideology, and it's a very strong, state controlled country. The country has a very strong central state.
Yeah.
You also have CPEC, and CPEC's arm goes through Xinjiang, right? That road, or which one is the belt and which one's the road? It's counterintuitive, belt and road, right?
I think that the road is the one that's going through CPEC. Check? Can you check?
Belt, but one of them, it's the sea belt and the land or no, it's the sea road, and on land it's the belt. It's weird because they have sea routes and they have land routes.
No, the land is the road,
and the sea is the belt. Okay.
I mean, we double check that, man. That's gonna, but that's passing through that. So how does that connect? What does that add to this
right?
issue?
So there's been instability in Xinjiang because there is a separatist movement, and a lot of these Uyghur rights groups are they call for separatism. Not all of them, but separatists have done like knife attacks. There have been suicide bombings. Knife attacks, suicide bombings, these kinds of things. Some of them are people from the ETIM, East Turkestan Islamist movement, which currently has a few thousand fighters in Syria. They're also worried about when these guys come back home. Well, they've already been doing this. Now they're even more radicalized, and they're better trained and equipped.
Yeah.
So now what are they going to do? And you see that the East Turkestan movement basically calls for the creation of a country called East Turkestan, and that's carved out of Xinjiang. I don't know what the exact territorial specificity is, but yeah, China is basically saying that we want to make sure that CPEC is secured. This is one of our things for our economic future. We need to make sure this region is secure, and their peculiar authoritarian way of doing that is to try to mass make people more patriotic and nationalistic. That's what I see this as being.
Yeah,
right?
There's
definitely a mass mobilization of people. There's definitely people being taken and said,
that's 100%. This is happening.
There is definitely something going on, and it's
as in
not
these mass people are being transported.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a pleasant thing that they're going through, right? But again, is it genocide? Right? Why are we not talking about this when we're talking about Palestine? Yeah. That kind of thing is okay, well, look, I'm not saying that, okay, it's a good thing that this is happening to the Uyghurs. I don't think that this is a pleasant experience that they're going through. I highly doubt it.
Far from it.
Far from
Farthest thing from it.
I would be pretty annoyed if someone was like, hey man, you need to be like this, and we're going to take you to school and put you through a whatever 4-month course on how to be a proper Chinese person. Yeah. Right? I would be pretty annoyed. Yeah. Or a proper American. If that happened to me here, I would be pretty annoyed.
Well, they did do that to you.
Well, they did. It's called K through 12. Right? We pledged allegiance to their flag every morning.
I pledged allegiance to Texas too.
And to the Texas. There you go.
Bro, you had a double trouble situation, man. Greg Abbott got your your allegiance, man. You know. But he didn't make you run after cars at the abortion clinic.
Pledge allegiance to the Abbott.
But that's what I'm saying. It's there's certainly something going on, right? I think at a certain point, mass testimony of something going on is hard to, because then you get statistical significance and these kind of things.
And I think it might be centered around the more the parts of the story that are more hysterical. Yeah. That so much of it seems like propaganda. But I mean, I'm agreeing with you. There's that I'm not ruling out that there could be something going on for sure, right? Of course. And you have a more in-depth understanding of it. What I have encountered so far has undertones of just straight up propaganda, right? Everything from the most recent, I read an article, I think who forwarded it to me? I think you might have, or Bilal, did you?
Which article?
It was by Jim Mattis' son.
Yeah.
Yeah, undisclosed by the way, almost, but Jim Mattis' son talking about the Chinese Muslim situation, and I don't know. I feel like anyone who's propagating the story, whether it's in the subcontinent or whether it's here, they do not care for the most part about. They don't like China, and they usually do not like Muslims either.
That's true.
So to assume that somehow this Chinese Muslim thing is just so dear and near to these people that they're willing to bring it up anytime there's another struggle going on, you could see the frequency of this story being part of like the popular discourse over the past 4 or 5 years now. Both, and you can tell who's propagating it depending on what's going on. When this Belt and Road Initiative was like taking, like traction, or like we definitely knew this was happening, you would see India really pushing it at some point. Like, oh look, it was these people are willing to do deals with China who are oppressing Uyghur Muslims, right?
Yeah.
And then when later
what
on,
kind of Muslims are you? How are you? And you're focusing on us
hypocritical,
and our
and like, don't worry about how we treat Muslims. You worry about who you deal with.
Your best friend treats them worse, type of thing. Yeah.
But it's almost childish. But you saw that people in Pakistan, when they realized that CPEC might actually have negative effects on what they're when you saw that both the new government in 2018, I think, and the military were kind of realizing that, hey, this might actually not be in our benefit. You saw the story coming to a head in Pakistan, being pushed by local conduits sometimes, like English media mostly, which is a big thing to demarcate because Urdu media is completely different. But in the English media, at least, you saw this thing being pushed around.
It was because all the sources are coming from English media.
Well, that might be probably the one of the primary reasons.
The NED, Radio Free Asia, those are English sources.
Well, also who they're appealing to in Pakistan, right? The same newspapers putting out the English and the Urdu one, but what he's putting out in Urdu is different than what he's putting out in English.
So remember there was that, I sent you this like Dawn article or Geo article or something, and it was something about like Cardi B.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell is this? Was that on their English or their Urdu?
English.
Yeah, so I was like, what the hell is this?
They're appealing to a specific crowd with that crap.
Dawn, Pakistan, talking about Cardi B.
And in their Urdu one, they'll be pushing like, oh, look at these people wearing this.
Yeah. Societal degeneracy, this, that.
So, and then you saw it here, this issue being thrown around so much, Chinese Muslims when, like in like the Trump administration.
Yeah. Trade war with China. We need to look how bad China is, right? So so what do you do, I guess, then in that situation?
Well, like you said, I think what you pointed to is the only way you can rationally look at any of these conflicts. Because honestly, there's a guy down the street from me who's sleeping probably like hungry today, and that's a struggle, right? And like I'm really just like I feel like if you need to look at things and form your opinions based on power, taking that into account. Now I know that's not the popular thing now, right? Because there's like if you're taking power dynamics and like material conditions into account, then you are like a straight up some like postmodernist. But nowadays you're a genius if you're able to analyze things without taking that into account, right? Like if you're like Malcolm Gladwell or something that, where you're like, oh well, if you're born in January you're poor, that's how it is, man. Like sorry to say, you're born in January, as opposed to some other thing. Not to reduce it, I know he's a great guy, I have to give him all the bullshit. But I mean,
there's some weird like Jordan Peterson shit.
It's less dogmatic because he appeals to like a very specific class of people.
There was something that he said that was along the.
He appeals to that professional managerial class of people who are like trying to find meaning in data and analytics.
You'd be surprised. There's some young people who are there's quite a few young people who are like Jordan Peterson. Yeah.
Of course, man. I mean, that you would think that
he's got a good following.
I've heard a lot of people derive a lot of good benefit.
Alt-right light.
What was his book? I know he has another one like that, a sequel to it, 12 Rules of like Life.
I don't know.
Or something, 12 Rules to Live By, right?
Yeah, it was something along those lines.
40 Rules of Love.
40 Rules. Oh man, I wonder
what God's giving you 10 commandments. This guy's giving you 12 rules to live by. He's even more intense than God.
Yeah, I wonder what
God's saying. Yo, don't sleep with your neighbor's wife. You're good. You can just go find someone in the next neighborhood, bro. But this guy is like, you gotta put a tie on in the morning to go work at like McDonald's.
No, so I'm gonna say this, right. I did hear a really good. He did have this one video where he laid out this really good way to kind of like organize your Dude, I wrote it down. I'm not gonna lie to you. I wrote this
No,
down.
I've heard very positive reviews of his first book, or at least the first volume of his 12 Rules of Life. I think that's the name.
Yeah.
I personally did not read it just because I don't know. I'm not really into self-help books that much, or like self-development. I should be, but I'm not. But I've heard it helped a lot of people. His psych help or whatever.
Yeah. So he's like, I literally wrote this down. Self-authoring for future self. Right. I don't know if that's what it was called. He mentioned this in a speech. Damn, my phone's about to die. So there's 6 dimensions: physical health, mental health, your family, your education, your career, and your significant other. Think about what would life be like in 3 to 5 years down the road if you set up all of those things the way you would want them to be for yourself or for someone you care for. Write a 15-minute life vision. You can have what you want, what would be good for you, and what would that look like. And then write for 15 minutes, what would life be like 3 to 5 years down the road if your bad habits and idiocies and foolishnesses and weaknesses continue. I don't know why I wrote that many. I might have been thinking about my idiotic, foolish, weakness, bad habits. I don't know. But yeah, so he was like, think about your life in this way, through these 6 dimensions, as if you want what you would want in these 6 different categories for yourself or for someone you cared for. And then think about what that looks like 3 to 5 years from now, if you do all that right. Now think about if you continue doing the bullshit that you're doing now for the next 3 to 5 years, what will your life look like? And that's the disparity that, So
I see that's very helpful.
Very, very helpful. I had to write it down.
Oh, definitely way more. I hate to admit it, definitely way more helpful than, I don't know. I read this book, Outliers. And then I tried reading.
Who's it by?
Gladwell.
Yeah, Malcolm.
That is by Gladwell. That is by Gladwell.
Why are you laughing about it?
There's people have to read that in school. Did you have to read that in school?
I read that before I had to read it in school, and then I had to read it again, and I was like, fuck.
They made you read. They making people read Malcolm Gladwell in high school.
Yeah,
Makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, the only logic that I can derive from it is like, hey, everything. There's a method to every. There's a reason for everything happening, and the reason is everything is random. And I'm like, okay, well, I understand. It was kind of it was definitely interesting reading that too. Sure. But I felt like it's even worse than Jordan B. Peterson's. Like, if you extrapolate what he's saying, and I'm not saying you have to. And if you're a rational person, you probably won't. Right. But we're talking about the including me, it's the average person, right? Just like how we take in and how we look at life, right? If you're taking. At least with Peterson, you're like, he's giving you like, oh, you should look at things through this, and he has that little Judeo-Christian undertones. Yeah. Not at least maybe to his writing specifically in the book, but overall what he's projecting, he has those overtones.
Yeah, because his thing is about like myth and the way that myth reflects what he wrote about. Initially was like about Judeo-Christian stories. Like he would talk about the Ark and these kind of things, and how they reflect something, extrapolating something from that. But that just came to mind when you said Judeo-Christian.
I mean, I've seen some funny clips of him doing the stuff like that, but I mean, most of what I've actually read from him was centered on like self-help. And then what I saw his. I mean, obviously, I saw his debate with Zizek,
which was a disaster.
Disaster. He looked nice though, man. I'm gonna tell him, this guy knows how to dress.
Spiffy.
Where's paying him, man? Yeah. This guy,
he's getting paid.
He grew the beard. Yeah. This guy. That's how you sell an ideology. That is
how you sell an
ideology. In our end, we got them stoner like Slavoj Žižek. He just got out of bed.
Exactly.
He's still a G though, bro. He came in
saying all kinds of crazy shit. But yeah, he came in and said what he had to say, told Jordan Peterson that he didn't even read the right requisite materials to talk about this.
But I read this book Outliers. Then I read another one. I started reading a second one from Gladwell also, and it seemed like he was trying to like really push this, and I'm not saying it's consciously sinister or something, but trying to push this like understanding of events happening without taking into consideration power dynamics and material conditions. And I find looking at material conditions or even like the history attached to that event or occurrence.
Yeah.
And I find like, any analysis of the world devoid of those those variables kind of to be very incomplete. Just
100% agree. Yeah.
And if that becomes not just something you're doing for fun, like I read this book, but like how I started viewing things.
Yeah.
Let's say I read Malcolm Gladwell exclusively. Everyone has a favorite author. I have a favorite author, right? And I'm sure those people affect you a certain way. Like the way I read Tariq Ali is one way. Like like I really just like vibe with what he's writing.
Yeah.
I can relate to this guy and his struggle personally in his lifetime and what he's writing.
Yeah.
Same way, if you were just to exclusively, or like primarily read Gladwell and reach a conclusion, I'm gonna try to extrapolate, like, I'm gonna try to analyze the world and find, like, without taking into consideration power dynamics. Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense why you would try doing that, and it also doesn't make sense to do that at all because it's incomplete. It's not, that's why, you can look, these are the logic games that you would have to indulge in then to be like, oh, well, the Uyghur Muslims and the Kashmiri, like, what's happening in Kashmir and what's happening in Yemen and what's happening in Syria and what's happening in Palestine and what's happening down the street. It's all the same. Yeah. It's all oppression. We need to fight it simultaneously right now. Right. And if we're not, then we are not doing our job. Yeah. Well, I mean, if that, you can only reach that conclusion if you are not taking into account power dynamics and what you're fighting. Yeah. And if you are that, like, tunnel visioned on an event, if you're event oriented, then you automatically have tunnel vision on that one specific thing, right? Yeah. So if you're that kind of like granularly looking at it, the event
is human rights violations. So anywhere there's human rights violations, it's oh my god.
Yeah. Anywhere a firecracker has gone off, anywhere anyone's thrown out of the house. Yeah. I mean, then I can make the argument too, because in COVID, so much of Harris County got evicted from their houses. They were evicting hundreds of people a week. Yeah. Well, I mean, is that not displacement? What do I call that, man? Someone who was living in a house now lives on the street.
Third Ward getting gentrified by U of H.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where does it end where you're like, okay, I understand. There's things happening in my local community that I need to be a part of every day. I'm not fighting for it once a year, bro, because you're a part of this community. It is incumbent on you to be involved in your capacity as in you're going to your PTO meeting, you're voting in your local elections, you're like, you're voicing, you're doing your research, you're voicing things at your HOA, you're at your kid's school board, the local stuff you should be taking care of anyways. Right. So when you're like, hey, what about this thing down the street? You're like, well, I mean, bro, if you're not involved at that level already, then I mean, what are you waiting for? You're waiting for someone to protest these people outside, or what? Should we do like some hunger strikes for like like Sugarland City Council now? Right. Like, what do you want? Yeah. Like, you want someone who's sitting in Pakistan to start hashtag Save Harris County? Like, what do you want? Yeah. Like, can we calibrate what we're trying to like fight, what we're trying to fight for, right? And I think that's the thing. Like, when we are talking about who to like, try to like take on the different projects or whatever we're doing, it's we're viewing things through a lens, and that's like, the lens is the politic that we hold. Yeah. So then we can formulate, okay, this is something that we need to fight in the immediate term because this is a direct like, transgression on our worldview at this moment. Right. Right.
And I would say integral to that worldview is seeing, like you said, that power dynamic and how Israel-Palestine is unique because that is a conflict that is a battle in the larger power play of the global hegemon. Yeah. And that's what makes that issue so critical, is not just the pictures of the tortured kids coming out of there. That is bad enough. Yeah. But it's the fact that that is a product of and factors into the global hegemon, the imperial power, the US of A.
The only,
and
it's a unipolar world.
Exactly. Solidifying what it's trying to do all over the place. And the crux, the axis, the nexus of that is Palestine. Yeah. Right? Everything that's going on in Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, The entire Middle East, North Africa,
Lebanon, Syria,
all of it
Egypt,
is all tied to, in some way, shape,
Trojan
or form.
horse.
Exactly, right? And so that's why this Palestine issue is so big. It's not because of just the death toll or the amount of destruction, but it's what is that? What is that in the grand scheme of
settler
things?
state, and that is degrees worse than like. Not worse. I don't. Again,
It's
you don't
not.
want to
But no,
quantify the
it's
worst
not about
part.
worse or
Like,
better.
yeah,
it's
not
about how
better or
critical
worse.
it is. It's about how critical it is.
Like how critical it is to our movement, our internationalist movement.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the lens you need to view
and that
it through.
movement, for me, is one of resistance against the global hegemon.
Yeah.
Right.
That has to be the ultimate, goal of it, right?
So then the interesting thing is when it comes to China, then, right? Okay, so I already accept that there's some fuckery going on there, right? No doubt. What do you do about it? Because right now, the people who are advocating for that, and the money behind the advocacy for that, and the power behind the advocate, the media, the platforming behind the advocacy for that is done by yours truly, the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, what do you want me to do? You want me to boycott Nike because they have a factory in Xinjiang? Do you want me to write to my local legislator? Do you want me to try to get Joe Biden
What's he gonna do?
to do something about it? Do you want me to go to the UN to do something about it? Right? Well, those are the same people who are funding the Israeli encroachment on Palestine.
Right, two
so
letters.
You can't put right. And
Write two letters.
Right,
You gotta write one letter saying, "Hey, man, fuck you for doing this." And the second one is, "Hey, please help me with this other thing."
Exactly.
It's like you know what it is. Syria. It's like I know this dynamic very well. I was in 9th grade, and two of my friends, man, we used to hoop together. They had a fight with each other. They were like pissed at each other, right? The one guy went to Morton Ranch, the other guy went to KD Taylor. So the guy's like, "Yo, fight me after. We're gonna meet up at this school after school's out, and we're gonna whoop your ass." They bet. But one of them is the only who's to drive us around, pick us up, and everything. So person A, who's fighting with person B calls person A. He's like, "Yo, man, I'm fighting you at this time. Can you scoop me?" And that's kind of what they're asking you right here, right? They're like, "Hey, man, we're gonna fight you tooth and nail until you free Palestine. But before that, could you help me free these Uyghurs real quick?"
Exactly. Therein lies the problem, and that makes the whole thing more nefarious. Because you're like, okay, if these are the people, if this is government, if this regime, if this establishment is the one that's pushing this narrative for the Uyghurs, and we know the narratives that they push elsewhere, right? Then this is suspect.
Yeah.
So what is it? And then you see it lines up exactly with what Trump and Biden and because they know they don't want CPEC to go through.
They don't want
CPEC to go
India
through.
doesn't want that.
India doesn't want that either. I mean, China is moving towards supposedly eclipsing the U.S. economically in the next not too distant future. Several decades, few decades, couple decades.
Yo, let's look that up real quick, man. I'm sure there's statistics. When does I'm sure they have projections on when the Chinese economy is just
will
kind of
surpass the United States
in production. I mean, right now, what is it that the U.S. economy produces? What is our GDP? Like 21 trillion a year, or something like that.
No idea.
Something like that. I'm pretty sure. We have a 100 to 100 ratio between national debt and GDP.
Okay.
Or give or take 100 to 110.
Because I was about to say 21. That sounds about right for the debt.
Yeah, it's 1-to-1 or a little bit more debt to GDP ratio, whatever it is, right? But I mean, that's all.
That's
whatever.
just arbitrary. Yeah.
But what were you talking about? Completely forgot now. It's like the friend of your friend
going to your abuser and telling him to help you with something.
It's like that friend of
2028.
2028, the Chinese economy will surpass that of the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder what's gonna happen, man. It'll be like a full moon or something.
It'll be like a full moon, bro. So that's the thing that they've been saying this for years. That China is the threat. China is enemy number one. I think more so than Russia now.
Well, I mean, yeah,
way more so than Russia.
I feel like Russia's just it's just some rundown state with a lot of weaponry and stuff, man. It ain't nothing more.
But as in the U.S. for a while had to pay attention to what Russia was doing, and they still do, and that was maybe more of a threat than China was at certain points.
I mean, since the fall of the USSR, I feel like, you know, it's just become like a mafia clubsy almost, right? Almost.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, recently they've started like taking more like of a role.
Yeah.
In their own neighborhood, and that's to flex, I guess, kind of like they're like kind of protect their own positions of power.
Yeah.
Focus on external things rather than internally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, like the ruble has crashed, and like natural gas
Yeah.
issues. The export to Europe was like, you know, closed down for a few years at least because of Crimea and everything.
Yeah.
And during that time period, like the oil market crashed. The ruble crashed during that time period. So, but no one, like, you know, Putin's still there. No one's messing with him, and if he is, he's dead and just sleeping with the fishes type situation.
Yeah.
They
need to make a documentary on Putin.
That would be actually worth like a movie on going Putin. Back. That's actually a movie worth making, a biopic on that. As
crazy story, man. Crazy story.
As opposed to some biased like crap on like Assange or something that they put out or whatever.
Weird, yeah.
But like we're talking about that thing with it reminded me of, you know, like anytime you voice this type of thing, like someone's like, you know, people have to like, you know, what is it called? Moderation police or whatever, or like whatever you want to call it, right? Like they're like, oh, you're the enemy of an enemy is your friend, and now they're stuck in this loop where like they go to the enemy of the enemy, but in a different situation that guy is the enemy also, screwing them over. So now they're actually
so they're going to their own enemy, really. Yeah.
And in reality, the other guys are like, hey, this is the enemy, and these are enemies that we're friends. Whole
entire like triangle. Cluster,
it just seems like, you know, you're stuck in a loop almost of like
so because
there's a loop of a logic game basically. That's because there is no
because your enemy is based on who's doing an oppression, not based on who is making the power plays on the highest level.
And oppression, you think oppression is not only I burn your house down, man. Oppression is like, you know, like when your wife goes out of the house and you know, like the employer is taking advantage of her by not paying her a fair wage, right? In the cities in this country. Or oppression is like, you know, like
people dying from medical debt,
people getting evicted during the pandemic.
Getting evicted, or people going bankrupt because of their health conditions.
Yeah, people having to pay like hundreds. I'm
or
saying
people
hundreds.
Dying
I'm not
because
saying thousands.
They can't afford the bill to.
I felt like there was like a statistic recently. I forgot, like 40% of people or something like that. I'm gonna look it up. 40% of people cannot afford a $400 emergency in this country. $400, man. That's like that's insane to me.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I'm saying hundreds, not thousands. People are going can literally be avoiding. That's oppression where people are having to like shell out hundreds of dollars for like medicine they need.
Yeah.
Because hundreds of dollars sounds like nothing when you say it like that, but hundreds of dollars
when you don't have hundreds of dollars for an emergency,
I mean for most of the country it's a lot of money, right? To shell out of nowhere if you're not budgeting for that, if you haven't thought about, you know, like people have accounted for rent, car expenses, everything like that. People don't have enough money to account for just like, let me put it in a rainy day fund only for healthcare, right. So if it's only oppression, or in these people's cases, oppression Olympics, because at the end they're gonna do mental masturbation and whataboutism and then go home and go to sleep. Right. As in like the reality of it is like you can argue like, hey, let's like fight over every one of these things, and you might be even able to accomplish that. Go to like, I don't know, attend one, I don't know, organize something, do something, and then how long are you gonna be able to sustain that? Right. And the argument against that, first and foremost, is if you wanted to, you could have done it anyways, bro. What's stopping you from organizing a Clubhouse call on the same thing if that's the only thing we're trying to do? Right. Well, that's one of the responses today. Somebody got pissed off and responded to that. Some random guy, he unmuted and he was like, yeah, well, you know, like this is the topic, keep it on topic, because if you want to, you can make 1 million Clubhouse rooms for 1 million different oppressions. Feel free to go ahead and do that. Because he presented the same argument. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Like, it makes no sense. You know, when you're talking about a movement, you're talking about that movement. Yeah. And you're working on that movement. Yeah. You know, there are intersectionalities, but then you can't draw an intersectionality between two movements where the bad guy is in cahoots with the guy advocating for the good guy. Yeah, it just makes it's a weird cognitive dissonance, and it's like, I don't know. It's like
it's
on
the same
this
thing
issue,
with Syria.
they need to disjoint it, right? Because they don't have an international movement to kind of look through the lens of into these issues. So then it's just disjointed. Like, oh, on this issue we can join with this guy to fight this guy, and on the other issue we're gonna fight this guy against the same guy
until we solve the oppression, and then it'll be done.
Yeah. But you don't realize, for them, fighting it is just simply like doing what they're doing right now, which is like talking on a Clubhouse maybe, or even like, you know, like posting it on like tweeting it out.
Sure.
And I'm not
donating
ever going
even,
to like I'm not ever gonna put down those types of activism, because in the modern age that is also activism in my opinion. Yeah. And that is if that is in your capacity, you do it for sure.
Yeah.
But we cannot pretend like, you know, there are not people who are doing the legwork. Right, that have the people who are actually standing outside with Teamsters. Yeah, people who are like, you know, on like people who have actually dedicated their academic careers not to something like MIS, like me in my case, or like engineering. Yeah. They went ahead and studied humanities. Right, they studied the subject, and now they're the experts in that field. And we cannot be like, well, we're gonna replace that intelligence or that's been accrued over time. But I mean, I like how like more people are getting mobilized with this, and hopefully it's something like, you know, that is sustainable. Yeah. Right. Because like I feel like we need to change this. It needs the questions being asked, and you know they need to change completely. Right, on this subject where like, you know, we're kind of like asking about, you know, or like reverting back to like 67 or like, you know, 48 or 73, even 48, which again, like, you know, is like big, you know, like. Even that, we're talking about something way bigger than this, right? And this is a really big symptom of the imperial state being there, right? Mm-hmm. And we like that. We need to ask our questions, and our discourse needs to be formed around taking that into consideration. We can't just ignore, like, you know, the elephant in the room, which is like, you know, like these people are like, you know, this state is there for a reason. This state has survived this long for a reason. They're being funded by someone, just like any other small state.
And they have some goal.
And they have a goal. They're trying to do something. This is this did not happen magically one day. It's not like, you know, people did not know this is going to happen somehow. When you're importing millions of people from Europe, you want to organize something and make it tech intensive and make it all like futuristic. That's what you need to do. Go to these student organizations and be like, hey, we will help you. We will give you the technological resources to organize on a better way. You don't have to depend and dedicate 40 hours a week to sharing posts and inviting people. We will give you a bot to do it. You will be able to organize on and collaborate with other organizations throughout the country through this portal that we created for you. Right? Yeah. That is the kind of organizing that we can that we need to, I guess, be a catalyst for by our skill set. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Honestly, that's where it starts.
For those of you who have the skill set.
Yeah, I mean, whatever skill set you have, right? I mean, you've been involved with this so long. Yeah. But this is like, it has to like be there, not like, you know, anything that you're doing online, or you're trying to do like, you know, like some like, you know, different offshoot, you're trying to do political education within your community. That is definitely going to be an ancillary thing to what's happening on the campus, right? Because it's just a diverse group of people meeting up, and you have youth is something that, you know, will be the driving force of any movement. Always. Right? Always. And that we really need to kind of give the younger generation the tools we did not have in organizing. Right. Right? Which is like, you know, having to do repetitive processes on our own for no reason, right? Having to like keeping like lists of tasks on your phone, copy pasting that on WhatsApp and stuff, right? That's how you're tracking a project that is gonna, you know, like cost you $5,000 and, you know, like be over the course of like 2-3 months, 4 months. We can I think we need to focus on the kind of giving these organizations that are really doing the work on the ground the technological resources they cannot afford, because they don't have the money that like we know like what the pitfalls of organizing that, you know, we face. Whenever like, you know,
in our experience doing it. Yeah.
But honestly, we're gonna talk about this again, man. We're gonna have to do like a whole, like, you know, the pitfalls of campus organizing, political organizing. Yeah. Community organizing, depending on what community you're associated with. Yeah. That's a that's a whole different, maybe a couple episodes, man. Mostly
I
of
think that's
expletives.
that's something where we probably want to get, you know, some of these people who have like really been in the depths of organizing onto
the depths of organizing.
I mean, the depths of organizing, as in like at least deeper than I've organized before.
Bro, I mean, definitely there's people who've organized on a deeper level, but
Yeah.
you have fair experience, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you've done it on every facet, right? I mean, I don't consider organizing only like, oh, we organized this riot or this protest and burned a couple, we shut down this road.
Yeah.
That is a part of it, maybe.
Right,
But I
right.
think organizing on like a more like rational, sustainable, lifetime level, right?
Sure.
Is on every part that you're able to take part, like every facet you're able to take part in. When you were able to take part in campus organizing, you actualize that. And in community organizing, you actualize that. And in political organizing, which is right here, honestly, that's like, you know, it's a closed circle. There's no way to get in unless you're like connected and already like, you know, part of that small gang, small crew. Unless you're already a part of that, like you've indulged yourself in that category as well.
Yeah.
So, I feel like, you know, you have the more than requisite experience to discuss this with nuance. But there's definitely people who I know.
The issue is like with my activism, a lot of it's been disjointed, right?
Man, it has
this
to be
thing over here,
because
that thing over there, that thing over there.
it's disjointed because there's disorganization, and that's what you're trying to solve, man. So yeah, I mean, that's the natural. Like, again, these are natural pitfalls of organizing.
Yeah,
And,
it is. No, definitely.
But I think we can save that for later, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, you know, that's something we can take away from this is like, you know, focus on, I guess, how we can better utilize our skill sets to facilitate, be better allies to this movement, man.
Right.
As we grow older out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What direction, what way, shape, form that's gonna take.
But now it's 1 a.m., man, so we'll sleep on it.
Yes, sir.